Bro, the Oscars track record for just the biggest controversies is stellar. It's quite impressive, actually. If we made a movie about it, I bet it would be nominated for an Oscar. Okay, it is Oscar season once again, which means that we have to talk about movies that, let's be honest, we didn't see. Half of these you didn't even know existed until they were nominated, and that's okay, because it just goes to show that they're not gonna nominate the shit we like. But there were a few that I still wanted to talk about before the actual Oscars. I got to see 6 out of the 10 that were nominated for Best Picture, and some of them I've already done reviews for, and I will leave the links for those, and here somewhere, and at the end. But there were a few that I got to see later that I promised I would talk about, especially The Substance, because you guys had voted for that sometime at the end of last year for me to do an actual review on that. So let's get right into it. Starting off with Conclave. Conclave is the religious thriller following the process of picking a new pope and the politics behind it. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Sergio Catalito, Lucian Samadi, and Isabella Rossellini. They are really making me work for these names. So when I first saw the trailer for Conclave, I immediately thought, why does this feel scary? This trailer made it seem like, and it's pretty accurate to the movie, that this is a heavy movie. This movie feels like steel for a religious movie. I mean, the title is Conclave. I really didn't think that it would actually be like that, but it very much is. There's a lot of moments in this movie that are genuinely even kind of creepy. It's very suspenseful, there's a lot of tension, and there's some moments that I'm like, wait, am I watching a horror movie or like a religious political drama / maybe thriller? And I would say that this is definitely the most straight up out of the 3 that I'm going to talk about. It's very straightforward. The Pope dies, they have a process to pick the new Pope, and there's a ton of politics behind it, and even though everybody says they're doing it for God or in God's name or for religious purposes, most of the time, 99% of the time, it's political and it's power and it's influence. And it's one of those that you go, okay, yeah, so then what's the point of watching the movie? We just kind of know how that's going to be. But it's one of those movies that it's so simple, it just lets you fall into the tension, the characters. There is a lot of conversation that comes up that isn't so straightforward. There's a lot in this movie that isn't black and white. What I really like about it is that you have different antagonists and different people who are not fit to become the next pope or be voted the next pope, but not just for the reasons you might think. Sure, there's 1 or 2 that maybe it's because they're too traditional and they're taking us back, but then there's others who are not fit, not because of their views, but because of other things they've done in the past, ways that they're trying to achieve this power. There's a lot of different sides to this, so it's very much not like a black and white one side or the other. There's a lot that goes into this, and I love Ralph Fiennes in this movie because he is the only true neutral force. He is really just trying to do his job and get out. He's trying to pick this pope as fairly as he can up against a lot of odds that are very, very hard to beat because there's so many people who are trying to screw it up. And it was just really interesting. I mean, I really liked his character, and you could tell that he really feels for this. He really wants to do what's right. And it's really nice to see that in a religious movie. Not that people in religious movies don't want to do what's nice. The thing is we just get all these religious movies that are just very surface level. It's really good to have one that is very realistic. And we also got Heretic last year. So both of these do a really good job at bringing that stuff up and kind of presenting this mindset of what we really should have as a foundation for conversations in this topic and in our world today. He does want to do the right thing, but it's not just this flowery, ooh, let's do it all in the name of God. He knows all of the politics that go into this and behind it, yet he's still trying to be as dedicated and as neutral as he possibly can be to get the right person in there, even with a very realistic mindset. And I really liked that and appreciated it. And for as straightforward as it is, there's still some questions that come up, like literal like plot questions, like, oh, who did this, or why are they doing this? And it kind of keeps you guessing at a certain point, which is really cool. And then obviously there are just the questions that come up in just the general conversation, and that people who watch this movie might have more conversations and discussions with each other about this stuff. It was just very interesting watching this as a Catholic, which has happened a lot with like Midnight Mass and Heretic and all of these that I've seen. We have to have a real mindset here, and it was very cool to see that and also have that in a plot where it is very intriguing and entertaining and it keeps you engaged. Also, the visuals. I didn't even touch on this, but the visuals are incredible. This movie is shot just so beautifully, even though it is very, I don't want to say bland, but it's very reserved. There's a lot of very neutral colors, except for reds and maybe pinks or purples. And I just thought it was beautifully shot. One of my favorite shots of the year is just all of them walking with their white umbrellas. It was just really, really well shot. I loved it. But what puts this movie over the top is absolutely the ending, because it could have been a very straightforward movie, ended in a way that's like, okay, they sort of resolved everything, but there wasn't, too much else that came out of it. The ending, the third act, brings up a whole new layer for this movie, for me at least, in which it not only resolves it, but it still makes you think. It presents you with more questions about, why can't this be the ending? In any other movie, the third act twist or the third act resolution that seems like there's another conflict coming would be a whole big thing that they have to fight, or they have to, work against, or, oh no, we did the wrong thing, we gotta fix it. And in this one, it seems like that for a split second, and then it makes you rethink it. And it doesn't reframe the whole movie necessarily, but it definitely makes you rethink a lot of things. So, this movie would have been pretty good, but for me, that last act just put it over the top, because it just emphasizes what's already been said, it solidifies a lot of things, and it puts it even further into all the messages that it's trying to put out there. It was just really, really well handled. So for everybody who skipped this movie, I don't blame you, but I would say give it a chance, because kind of like Heretic, it brings up a lot of very realistic questions, but we get to see kind of into the very deep core of how this process goes. I'm going to give Conclave a 4 out of 4. Making it my next top shelf movie. Moving on from that stellar movie, let's talk about Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez is a story about a drug lord who undergoes a sex change operation to get out of the business and seek redemption by fixing Mexico's crime problem. And it's a musical. This is literally the best way I could describe it. It stars Carla Sofia Gascon, Zoe Saldana, and Selena Gomez. I do not even know where to begin with this movie. So what I'm going to do is read you a text I sent to one of my friends basically after I saw it. This will kind of sum it up. The more I think about it, I really don't like and may actually hate this movie. Doesn't make sense in any way, plot, genre, etc. Too many directions, sometimes too over the top, sometimes too simple, honestly boring. Cinematography is sometimes cool, but other times purposefully atrocious. Dialogue is bad, and that doesn't even begin talking about the issues with the trans and Mexican sides of things that I know are there, but don't actually know the full extent of or can explain well enough. I was deciding between this and The Brutalist. Those were the last two that I wanted to see before the Oscars, because I had heard so much buzz about them. The Brutalist was 3.5 hours. Originally, I wanted to add this to this video, and I just didn't get to watch it because it was so long. I should have watched The Brutalist. It's my fault. I should have watched The Brutalist.
But you didn't.
Okay, so let's unpack all of these thoughts that I sent to my friend. This movie changes its plot every 30 to 40 minutes. As a whole, I guess I can see sort of where it starts and goes through, and my synopsis of the movie basically covers most of it, but there are still things where I'm like, where did that even come from? I don't even, what is the point of this movie? Because it seems like it's one thing, and then it goes to the next thing, and then the next thing, and it could be any one of those things, and they could just dive more into that, but they keep adding stuff, and none of it is good. So it's already hard to see what the point of this movie even is. Maybe it's just to entertain. Maybe it's just supposed to be this big entertaining musical. No. You can genre bend and mix genres, and it can be really weird, but it can be done well, or be like, at least that was new and interesting and unique. There's one I watched just in the last couple of months called Anna and the Apocalypse. It's a zombie movie, it's a teen high school movie, and it's a musical. That shouldn't work. But it did. In this, it does not work. Not one fucking bit. And the reason is because the movie sucks. The plot not only changes, but sometimes it's so complex and so many things are happening. And then sometimes it's too simple and too boring, and I don't know what the hell's going on. I just didn't care almost the entire movie. And we gotta talk about it. Let's talk about the music. It's atrocious. You know me. Like, unless I really don't like a movie, I try to defend parts of it or be like, all right, at least there was this and there was this. There is one song in this musical that while I was watching it, I was like, okay, I think I like this one. Going back and watching it again, I think I just had real low standards by that point, because it's still the best song of the movie, but it still made me cringe a lot the second time around. First time around, I thought, maybe this is kind of cool, choreography and lighting and everything. Second time, I liked it way less. That is the auction or gala, I guess, party that they were having, and it's the main one in the middle. You know what I'm talking about. It's still just weird, and yet that's the best one, and you already know what I'm talking about.
Men to woman, or woman to men.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina. Is it for you?
For me.
What would you like to know about it, madam?
I think my personal hell would be if I had to sit in a chair and listen to the music of this movie for eternity. Specifically this. Now I understand how people who watch Joker Folie à Deux and hated the music, I understand how you feel now. And people who hate musicals in general, now I get you. This is what you must feel like all the time. And honestly, Selena Gomez, that's another thing. Her character, Jessie, I thought it was going to be a bigger role. I thought she was more important for this movie from what I had been seeing in the promos and the trailers and everything. And they basically give her almost nothing to do. There's not really an entire purpose for her character to be in here, except for like a couple little things past the beginning of this movie. She could have had more of a role, and they just didn't. And the stuff that she had wasn't that interesting. And that's basically every character in this movie. Zoe Saldana specifically. She is important at the beginning of the movie, and then it's like they struggle to find something for her to do for the rest of the movie. And then it gets to the end, and I don't even know where the crap any of that came from. I don't know where we were not building to the finale that we got, this big climax. And that doesn't even touch on the issues that are bigger with this movie, aside from it sucks and it's not entertaining. It's offensive. First of all, I can tell you at least that it's offensive to Mexicans because of basically how they treat the country in general, even though there's pretty much, I don't think any Mexican, there might be a few in the background, but no main Mexican actors or actresses are in this movie. And yet they're going on like Mexico is a shithole and there's all these people dying and we have to fix the crime and they're not doing anything about it. And they do it in such a holier than thou way. Like, we're going to come in here and I'm going to be the one to be the savior for all of Mexico. I don't know, man. This movie's very high on itself. And then same thing with like all the trans issues. It's like, this is not the representation that we want for trans people. There were so many other movies that came out last year that involved or touched on or were literally about trans people, and this is the one they decided to nominate. I'm just beside myself. So this movie sucks. It's one of those that I'm like, I when I have a movie like this, which is rare, but then I'm just ripping into, I think, wait, am I being too harsh on this? There's got to be something in here. No. Nope. I hate this movie. I really didn't like it at all. It seems purposefully terrible in all ways, even the visuals. It seems like some shots are okay, but others it seems like they're making it purposefully ugly as sin, just for no reason. I don't know. I didn't like this at all. The dialogue's bad. Songs are bad. Story's bad. Movie's bad. I'm going to give Emilia Perez a 0.5 out of 4, which is the first time I've ever given something that low of a score. That's crazy. I don't know why I didn't give it 0, but I just feel like I don't know. Maybe I could give it 0, but I feel like I can't. There's got to be something good with it, right? Something. I'll say the actors. The actors tried their best. Even if one of them's the worst. Okay, let's move into something a little bit more lighthearted. Somehow. The Substance. The Substance is the wacky body horror following a TV star quickly becoming irrelevant as she tries the titular process which results in her sharing her life with her younger self. It stars Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. Alright, so this is the one that you guys wanted me to talk about, and honestly, I'm really glad, because when I put out that poll, and you guys nominated that one, out of all the other ones, The Wild Robot, Kinds of Kindness, a couple others, it was like, you're really gonna make me watch this. And this ended up being my number 3 movie of the year for a couple different reasons. First of all, the cinematography is just so unique. It's wacky, it's weird. There's all these interesting colors in the palette, mostly whites, reds, yellows, oranges, pinks, all warm colors for the most part. A lot of it feels very sterile, and then a lot of it feels very wacky and over the top. And this whole movie, the cinematography is over the top on purpose. There's a lot of like fisheye lens, like a lot of that, like extreme, and it makes you automatically from the beginning of the movie feel very invaded. Like your personal space is being encroached upon and you're being looked at and judged 24/7 by Dennis Quaid. I'm gonna put this in here real quick. If you have any form of, what is that called? I can't remember what the phobia is called, where people are like chewing and all of that. Or even if you're just like a human being in general, watch out for any scene that Dennis Quaid is in, or eats, or exists, and maybe stay away from chicken for like a month or so after this movie. But the visuals were just really, really cool. There's so many good shots in this movie that not only are just interesting to look at, but are very symbolic, and it has an overwhelming homage to The Shining, and I don't think that's like on purpose for the story itself, like it's supposed to mean anything. I just think that this director really likes The Shining and then just wanted to give an homage to it, because there's a lot of shots that are very like it. Of course, the makeup, the body horror, the prosthetics, all of that is so good. And even if it points in this movie, it's like, yeah, I can tell that this is a prosthetic, obviously. It's better for it. It just makes it that much more visceral and gross and terrifying that this is happening. Yeah, there's a lot of horror in this movie, but obviously it's specifically in the gross out body horror factor. And it's good. It really gets you. There's a lot where I'm just like, ooh, I did not want to ever see that. I don't want to ever see that again. But of course, what puts it over the top for me, and you all know this by now, is I really love a tight, very well-constructed story, specifically if it has a metaphor or some sort of symbolism, and it sticks to its rules. It's got a cool process of rules. And this movie has very specifically laid out rules. They follow them, like, pretty well. Like, I was surprised. I thought there's going to be some point in this movie where these rules don't make sense, or they've done something that sort of breaks them, but not on purpose. And then later on in the movie, they followed them so well that they do break a rule. But now, instead of being like, oh, you screwed up, it's, oh, this is on purpose. Now what? And that's an always interesting thing that happens in movies where something shouldn't happen, but it does, but it makes sense, and now you're like, ooh, I don't know where this is going to go. And it was very cool. It was just very interesting to see what they were going to do with this concept. And that's what's really great about it, is because on one side you've got something so entertaining and wacky and weird, and it's entertaining you in that way, but underneath it's really gripping you too, with all of these messages and themes that are very relevant, can hit very hard no matter who you are, and the reason it works so well is because of the performances. Margaret Qualley does an amazing job in pretty much everything she's in. She's just naturally really, really good, and she basically does that exact same thing here, having just this natural charisma and energy and fire in her. Dennis Quaid I've already mentioned, but you know, he just plays the worst character, the grossest character in this movie, and he's a big stereotype, but it works because the movie is so over the top on purpose. But the one who absolutely blows it out of the water is obviously Demi Moore, who up until this point, I don't think I've ever actually seen her in anything. And people are saying that this is probably her best role that she's ever done, because not only does she obviously commit to this really insane stuff that goes on with her and to her in this movie, it just gets so weird. She commits to that fully. But the stuff that's really raw is the stuff that will stick with you the most, which is saying something considering what this movie does visually, and, you know, body horror and all of that. But the one scene that stuck with me is the one that I know, even without having talked to anybody yet after I saw it, that this was that scene in the movie that everyone just felt deeply. And it's the scene where she is getting ready for a date. She's ready. She's about to go. And she stops. And she goes back. And she fixes her hair. And she goes. And she stops. And she goes back. And she keeps seeing her younger self on this billboard. And so she keeps trying to perfect and perfect to the point where she is just messed up. And that is terrifying. Because that is our brains wanting to find perfection in something that doesn't need to be perfected. And perfectionism will eat at you and scratch until your brain is raw and you will never actually find it. And so it was such a good scene because it just gave you so much tension and suspense, but we've all been there with something, whether it's beauty standards or something else. We've all been there where we can see the clock ticking and we are going to be late or we are going to miss something, but we just can't move on until this has been perfected. Such a good scene. The only thing for me for this movie that, like, I just wasn't sure about, when they do break the rule, okay, I guess I did say before it makes sense. For me, it mostly made sense. It was enough that I didn't really care. But if I really thought about it, I wasn't quite sure why one thing happened closer to the third act. Again, this movie is very over the top. It's kind of like Sorry to Bother You, where it sets you up for a very over-the-top finale to the point where if you didn't have that, you'd get to that finale and go, literally, what the hell, this movie sucks. But because it's set up that way, you're like, okay, I can see it. For me, it was still a little bit too much, but it was crazy. It gets the point across. It's for the metaphor. It was an insane ending. So I loved The Substance. It ended up being one of my favorites of the year. It was just so interesting. They nailed this metaphor and these themes that they were going for. There's really palpable scenes in here of tension and just stuff that we can all relate to. I just love that we're getting original horror that is not only visceral and relatable, but just looks good. I'm going to give The Substance a 3.5 out of 4. I think I'm also going to give it the Shell Shocked Award. Yeah, I like how that feels. Well, guys, those are the 3 big ones that I wanted to talk about before the Oscars. I'm nervous that they're gonna do really weird things with Emilia Perez. What do you think's gonna win? What do you hope to win? And not just Best Picture. Acting, crew, cast, everything. All the visuals, everything. Because all the categories matter. Every category matters. And more. I wish they had stunts. I don't know why they don't have stunts. It's so dumb. Andy Serkis should get something for motion capture. It's so dumb. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below of these movies. And as always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and Emilia Perez nowhere near the middle. I'll see you guys later.